Urgent! Columns of Russian equipment in the Dnipro region. Russia's fleet to the bottom. Ukraine has done the impossible. F-47 fighters will change everything. A real skybreak. Tanks leveled Russian positions with the ground. Shocking footage hit the network. The Russian army hinted at capitulation. All this in our episode Hellpoint. A powerful strike on the Kharkiv region. Half a battalion of invaders down. A lightning operation. Everything the enemy had, a tank, BMP, motorcycle, vanished into oblivion. Our forces operate clearly and precisely. Rescue is only a dream for the occupiers. How did we manage to strike painfully at the enemy's artery? We'll cover this in just a moment. The Black Sea is no longer for the occupiers. Ukraine did what was not believed possible. The Russian fleet is at the bottom. A historic moment right here. Everything was destroyed in a matter of minutes. This is not a storm. This is Ukrainian wrath. Russia's pride sank along with the iron and dreams. We'll tell you more about this in our report.
The most powerful ship of the Black Sea Fleet with a satellite system and supersonic missiles on board. A battle cruiser where leaders of various countries have met multiple times. It also has its own headquarters and even a separate air defense system. Overall, the pride and symbol of the Russian Federation, which, as befits a symbol, went to the bottom of the Black Sea. The cruiser Moskva. It was the defense forces on Snake Island that sent it on its well-known course. The ship's journey ended 3 years ago when it was hit on April 13th and it sank on the 14th.
This, I think, was the most powerful and the most modern technologically advanced ship of the Black Sea Fleet since 1982.
The value of the Moskva was estimated at $750 million. It was essentially a floating air defense system, thanks to which the Russians controlled the entire space over the Black Sea. The destruction of the Moskva allowed for the liberation of Snake Island and the unblocking of maritime trade routes.
They used it as a command ship. That is, it could actually accommodate about 50 to 60 staff officers, and they could manage these ships, aviation, and marines. For this, it had special communication equipment.
How many sailors died on board is unknown. The sunken cruiser continued to send greetings from the depths for a long time, as civilian sailors in the middle of the sea found rusty oars and leaky life rafts. Probably, out of the 500 Russian crew members, someone did try to swim out, although Mr. Andriy is sure that they were already in trouble, even before the missile strikes.
The weather was so stormy that a significant number of the crew simply fell seriously ill. None of the air defense system were working, and these missiles simply hit the ship.
Thus, the Black Sea monster ended up as a broken plastic toy, unwanted by anyone, in the middle of the Black Sea. However, even from the seabed, it has already acquired a new status, officially, as an underwater cultural heritage of Ukraine. The Russian warship became famous on a stamp with a record 1 million copy circulation. It spawned hundreds of now historical memes, becoming the hero of exhibitions, museums, and films, all with the main thesis: Ukraine built the Moskva, Ukraine burned it, and now Ukraine is studying it as the cruiser was built in Mykolaiv. Gradually, piece by piece, the flagship is now being resurrected in a Ukrainian museum. These are the remains of the legendary Moskva that are sea-washed ashore. A lifebuoy, a signal buoy, and also the remains of the Neptune missile which sent the ship to the bottom. According to all the laws, they are now being studied by Ukrainian scientists.
And here is the Guard missile cruiser and operational number 121. At that time, only the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the missile cruiser Moskva, bore this. So this item is original. This item is genuine. This item is from the missile cruiser Moskva.
In the Central Naval Museum of Ukraine, they also know the exact coordinates of the sunken Moskva. Director Serhiy Voronov says the depth there is about 50 meters. This means that it will definitely be possible to retrieve many interesting items from there. The flagship itself is large, so even beginner divers will be able to descend and at least see it from above. Moreover, the Moskva sank successfully near ancient ships and more modern wrecks of the Russian fleet.
This is one of the 3,000 sunken ships that we know of, which lie in the waters of Ukraine and are on our record. Most of them are not sunk, but damaged. For example, the Saratov, a large landing ship that was destroyed in Berdyansk, we did not record because it practically did not sink. It settled on the seabed.
There are plenty of exhibits for scientists on the seafloor. In just 2 years, following the cruiser Moskva, Ukrainian defenders sent at least 6 landing ships to the bottom. The largest among them are the Olenigorsky Gornyak, Minsk, Novocherkassk, and Caesar Kunikov. Among them, the submarine Rostov-on-Don, a missile boat, several patrol ships, and even a naval minesweeper went to the bottom with their full load. In the 24th year, the defense forces somewhat accelerate the departure of the squadron from Crimea when Attack MS strike the missile ship Cyclone. After this, the Magura drones finish off the smaller boats one by one. And finally, the General Staff report highlights the figure. 29 Russian naval units destroyed. Can it be said somehow that 15 serious ships remain?
Well, yes, about a dozen and a half. These are frigates. They are precisely the missile carriers. These are corvettes, again, missile corvettes, and a few landing ships remain there. But very tempting.
Ukraine has finally expelled the Black Sea Fleet from the Crimean bases and did so not only without its own fleet, experts say. It continues to adhere to the strategy of primarily destroying what is targeted by missiles, where landings are made and where ammunition is hidden.
We have driven the enemy out of the northwestern part of the Black Sea, lifted the blockade from our ports, and launched maritime cargo flow to our ports.
In Sevastopol, only damaged ships remain, which the Ukrainians occasionally send back for repairs. Due to a lack of forces, the Russians have relocated the base of the surviving ships to Novorossiysk. From there, missile carriers are still taken out to sea under full cover of patrols, and helicopters, while the most valuable ones are hidden in the rocks under the protection of a dozen Russian air defense systems. Of course, there are still many monsters in those ports capable of handling the most powerful combat missions, and the occupiers are constantly looking for loopholes to protect them. However, our naval forces are acting proactively and know exactly how, where, and when the entire Black Sea Fleet will go to the bottom. Olena Hushchuk, Volodymyr Perekonsky, Oleg Herashchenko, Denis Yaroshenko, TSN 1+1 Marathon. United News.
Ukrainian armed forces tankers hit the occupiers near Pokrovsk. A fierce mess. Steel tears the ground beneath it. Our defenders block the enemy's path. The Russians are surrounded. The battlefield is no longer theirs. Donbas speaks Ukrainian. Is this the end of the Russian army? Watch about it right now.
Shot!
That's how you drive up to the cellar or the dugout. Lower the gun and fire.
The tank operates with direct fire just meters away from the enemy.
Shot!
Speed, armor, fire, and maneuver. The battle formula from the tankers of the 32nd Brigade who are fighting the occupiers near Pokrovsk.
Even if a group of 5 or 6 people is moving, they try to cover them.
The Ukrainian 64 takes its usual route out of the forest plantation and heads to the firing position. Covering a certain distance, the tank hides among the trees and begins to engage enemy targets. Yes, there it is. Shot.
They say it's worth it, so it is worth it.
Shot!
In the military, this is called working from concealed positions, where the tank crew does not see the enemy but fires at given coordinates. A few minutes of work and the crew returns to a conditionally safe zone.
This tank is very effective. It is effective even when concealed, with accuracy, range, and it can use both cumulative and fragmentation shells. It is also effective in direct combat after all. With armor we enter. There are cities where...
Vasil is the commander of a T-64, with experience in battles for Avdiivka, Marinka and the Donetsk airport back in 2014. How did he become a tanker? He says it was a funny story.
They said whoever has a driver's license. Well, we raised our hands and now we're tankers. Nothing proudly.
We sit, freeze, kill the bastards, and thank everyone who helped. He kills them.
With these boars.
The Great War caught Vasil in the Czech Republic. He was working in construction there and immediately returned. And for over 3 years now, the tank crew has become his second family. It is his combat vehicle that breaks into the village occupied by the invaders and shoots the enemy at point-blank range.
We needed to dismantle them. Those buildings there, well, there were a large number of enemy assault groups. So we got there, dismantled them. But again, FPV devices, such an interesting thing. The tank is a primary target for the enemy, so the Russians direct not only drones at it, even guided aerial bombs are sent towards it to disrupt it. That's it. You had shrapnel too, right, Sonia? Such metal to break it as if it was crushed like plasticine.
Volodymyr, the commander of the Armored Vehicle Repair Unit, shows the aftermath of the aerial bomb strike.
It was literally nearby. The guy said, I think about 5 or 10 meters away. I'm not exactly sure. Most likely to the factory. Or maybe with our own efforts, it's unknown.
Volodymyr's Policia dialect gives him away at the front. He was lucky to meet a fellow countryman.
Chernihiv? Yes. It turns out we're neighbors too. Everything maybe. The road, right? Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. That's how it is one to another. War is such a plague.
Before the full-scale invasion, Volodymyr worked as a truck driver, and he learned about the attack by our sworn neighbors while on a trip.
Between France, where it borders with France and Spain. So I said, boss, hello, I'm going home. He said, Mr. Volodymyr, I understand.
Volodymyr is a participant in the defense of Chernihiv, and he says that if anyone knows what the Russian world is, it's him. He has traveled it far and wide. He assures that we don't need anything like that.
Trikotsapov, how do they live there? From Moscow? Well, kilometers. Well, 100 is already a lot, probably. That's not Russia. Anymore, that's the 19th century.
My father was a Cossack Tatar, and my mother was Russian. We registered as prisoners.
Yes, among the tankers there is also a Russian, Rodion, the crew commander. However, he always clarifies in conversation that he is Russian only on paper. He grew up in Sumy.
How are we Nazis? They're the ones invading.
And Rodion has been defending Ukraine since 2014. He served in the artillery, now he's a tanker.
The full-scale invasion started on February 24th. My son was born, and on the 24th, everything began. My wife was in the maternity hospital, and I was already running around with a rifle in the occupation. He didn't take it to heart.
In modern combat, a tank is an assault weapon, but without a crew, it's just a combination of armor, a cannon, and other mechanisms. The Formula C shoot is about tankers.
Don't get confused. Be confident. Confident in your abilities. Well, mainly everything depends on the commander. As he calculates, the gunner will do everything. And then the shooting will be good.
Let's do another one. Let's do another one.
Fire!
Near Pokrovsk, Russian troops are bogged down in a war with the Ukrainians. The role of tankers in the defense of the city is significant. For each of them, the next day of the war is another day of hard and deadly dangerous work.
God willing, it will hit in such a way that everyone survives and gets out of the vehicle. Well, there are moments when it hits in such a way that it explodes along with the crew.
From the Eastern Front, Ihor Levenok, Bohdan Savrotsky, Oleg Kukarsky. Details, Inter TV channel, Marathon.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
United News.
Putin's army moved towards the Dnipro region. Fierce battles and meat assaults. The front is groaning. The occupiers have only a few hours left with live coverage of the enemy engagement. This hasn't happened for a long time. These incredible scenes have already shaken the internet. Watch them yourself. It's worth seeing.
The orcs are dragging their wounded, who was finished off. Now they are in the bushes. We are sending drops.
The fruit orchards of Donetsk have become a battlefield in this section of the front.
An assault group of 7 people is moving towards our positions. Now they are being targeted.
7 is quite a number, the fighters say. The goal of these enemy soldiers is to reach our infantry positions. By any means. At least some of the assault troops.
I say they accumulate, and then make a dash. They accumulate and immediately try to break through on all sides.
They advance stubbornly, the soldiers say. Even when wounded, they try to advance. It seems like there's no way back for them, our soldiers say. The pilot operator shows proof of this. At night, when repelling a similar assault, one of the wounded occupiers didn't even try to call for evacuation. He chose a different path.
You can see him lying there, turning over his rifle now.
Before this, 3 drops were made on him. It got to him and he decided to shoot himself. Perhaps it's an easier death than from a drop. Probably not as painful for him. And no one rescues them. And they abandon all their wounded, not taking a single one.
Along the same forest strip, a new group of assault troops is advancing in the morning. Our reconnaissance drones constantly keep them in sight. There should be even more of such drones in the unit. You can donate to the collection for the fighters using this QR code. Meanwhile, the pilots are equipping the strike FPVs. The enemy is still a few kilometers away from our trenches, so there is time to lure the Russians into the so-called kill zone. And here is the result of another hit on a Russian soldier.
This was just executed live. It caught fire.
He was the very first one going, and 2 were somewhere higher up.
The accomplices of this Russian are somewhere nearby, but they don't even try to help him. They just leave him among the trees and simply move on. This is what is called a meat assault by the occupiers, our military says. If one assault group doesn't reach our trenches, they immediately send a new one. And so it goes on endlessly, because the lifespan of a Russian in such an assault is just a few hours.
One of them is a 200, one is a 300. We are currently searching for the rest in the bushes. Well, it's a matter of a little half an hour to an hour before we eliminate them. And a few hours is their lifespan.
Their task is to reach the borders of the Dnipro region. And although there are only a few kilometers left to the regional borders, the Russians cannot overcome them.
According to our information, their task was to reach the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region by the end of March, to take some strategic supply chain, which is absent. Here, I think the main task is primarily to enter the Dnipropetrovsk region for the first time since the beginning of the war. In one of the clearings, so the 800 meters long, we counted over 100 enemy bodies, but the enemy continues to move through this clearing.
Here's another hit on the enemy soldiers. The group of Russians is almost defeated. The soldiers of the 72nd Brigade, named after the Black Zaporozhians, did not let them reach our infantry. This brigade has recently reinforced the direction.
This is already the 3rd enemy standing against us. Our battalion alone inflicted over 400 losses, including personnel, losses of the enemy, and more than 10 tanks, over 30 units of armored and lightly armored vehicles, approximately 2 battalions. Before this, they tried to advance using only manpower. They brought in equipment, and for the first time in about the last month, the enemy used more than 10 tanks and armored vehicles, something that hadn't been observed in this direction for several months.
But in the village behind these Russians, our drones are detecting new occupiers. The drones can't reach there, but the artillery can. There are only a few minutes left until the command fire, but our soldiers cancel it. The drone pilot sees 2 women walking among the ruins on the street.
We don't do anything to them. They continue living there, where there's some cover.
In the southern part of Torak, people have been living for up to 10 years.
To avoid harming the locals, our forces do not fire. They have no choice but to wait until the next group of attackers comes out towards us again. For them, the drones should be enough, say the Black Zaporozhians. Yulia Kirienko, Alexander Shian, Oleg Mostovi, TSN, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
The sky stands still, and on the horizon, a new predator appears. The F-47 fighter jet literally bursts into the era of air dominance. This bird could become a nightmare for Russian pilots. Will we see it in the skies over Ukraine? We'll tell you in just a moment.
No one has ever seen anything like this. Donald Trump stated that the USA has created the best fighter jet in the world, with unprecedented performance. And it seems to be the first time in history that the United States has declassified a new aircraft project, even before its actual creation.
And the NJet program itself, and to be honest, until today, until Trump's statement, was largely shrouded in complete mystery, in the sense that no one even knew for sure if even a single prototype had been produced under this program. Now, after Trump's statement, it is officially clear that indeed such an aircraft not only exists on paper, but is already flying.
To be fair, it should be noted that only the prototype is flying for now. However, even what is known about it today already leaves no chance for the F-47's competitors.
This is something that no one has seen before in terms of all the fighter's characteristics. No one has even come close to such speed, maneuverability, or what it can carry as a payload. And it has been in development for quite a long time. The F-47 will become the most advanced and deadliest ever created. The experimental version of the aircraft has been flying secretly for almost 5 years.
However, aside from loud statements, some specific characteristics of the first sixth-generation fighter have leaked to the press. The main sensation was that it is essentially the first unmanned aircraft of this class.
The NJet is primarily an aircraft with optional piloting. It means that it can actually operate, both in piloted mode and in unmanned mode. These will be drones that will be integrated into the control system.
It is also noted that these drones will be quite multifunctional and will be able to perform various tasks depending on the type of mission the F-47 is deployed for.
Some of these drones will be engaged in targeting, some in reconnaissance, and some will directly serve as strike platforms. That is, they will carry the appropriate armament, but in any case they will be subordinates, meaning they will be controlled directly from this very F-47.
However, the full unveiling of the F-47 was only for civilians. US military pilots have long been aware of the novelty and its potential capabilities. They say the fighter was designed to be able to prevent future threats. And as time has shown, the calculations were justified.
This was conceived about 10 years ago. And in fact, the president announced today that we have been flying the prototype of this aircraft for 5 years. This means we are trying to stay ahead of any potential threat, whether it be China or anyone else. And we are raising our standards to have the strength we need at any point on the globe.
Additionally, analysts add, to remain invisible at any point on the globe. The unique stealth technologies on the F-47 make it invisible to all modern radars.
The B-21 radar is indeed built with super stealth technologies that provide it with almost total invisibility on all modern radars. That is, no radar system, as far as can be understood, will be able to detect it. That means everything Russia has, everything China has, will be useless against the radar. And of course, the NJet, or rather this F-47, will possess at least the same technologies as the B-21.
It is known that the F-47 will exist in two variants. A conditionally European one, where the fighter will have a shorter range and higher maneuverability, considering the extensive network of military bases and airfields, Nekakos, and a Pacific one, where it will have to fly further and carry much more.
I consider this truly a combination of all the best qualities of technology that we can produce today for aircraft of the F-type. If we take, for example, the western part of the Pacific Ocean and the area around Taiwan, many threats have clearly increased there. To neutralize them, we now need a technological leap, and it is promised that the F-47 will provide us with it in 3 to 4 years.
At the same time, the presentation of the aircraft was not without its embarrassments. Military analysts noted that the fighter received a rather strange index, being 47. Everything fell into place when Trump called it a very good number, and the media noted that he is indeed the 47th President of the United States.
Ballistics, aviation and cruise missiles, as well as hundreds of drones. This is the set that Russia launches daily at Ukrainian cities, attacking both the civilian population and critical infrastructure. Reliable defense is what can preserve Ukrainian cities. After all, the more defense systems Kyiv has, the fewer deaths and destructions Russia will cause. How to make the Ukrainian sky safe? The country has introduced an updated plan called Sky Shield.
Our individual allies, outside the alliance, that is, Western European countries not within NATO, will help us protect our rear areas, rear regions, from Russian attacks with Shahed drones, cruise missiles, and there's a big question about ballistic missiles, with the help of aviation.
In the event of the slightest danger from Russia, 120 fighter jets will be ready to engage in battle. To, on one hand, protect civilians, and on the other hand, relieve Ukrainian military forces, so they can focus on the front.
However, the skies will not be closed over the battlefield or the occupied territories, but approximately, starting from a retreat of 150 to 200 kilometers from the demarcation line inward. There, Ukraine will be patrolled by, for example, French, German, and British planes to relieve the capabilities of our aviation so it doesn't have to fly. For instance, from Ivano-Frankivsk to Zhytomyr, allowing it to be concentrated exclusively on the strip where there will be no European planes.
The shield will be able to cover 3 operational nuclear power plants in Ukraine, as well as cities like Odessa and Lviv, but not the front line or the east of the country. And this could be much more effective than sending 10,000 European troops to Ukraine. The Protect Ukrainian Sky project is not new. Discussions about it have been ongoing since 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale war.
It was developed by specialists, former and current experts, former specialists of the Royal Air Force of the United Kingdom. And they worked through all possible risks, dangers, threats, and consequences that could arise in connection with the launch of this project. And back then, this project did not receive such crazy support.
The idea received new momentum after Zelensky's dispute with Trump in the White House. At that time, the U.S. suspended military aid to Ukraine and limited intelligence sharing.
I understand that Macron proposed this idea of an Eastern Shield in the form of a nuclear umbrella. Because there were concerns with what will we do if Russia attacks us? So obviously, in response to this, Macron proposed such measures. Well, judging by all the discussions on this matter, Europe is waking up, realizing that it needs to rely on European forces. There's no point for the European Union, which has 440 million people, to ask for help from a country with 330 million people and say, please protect us. We need to defend ourselves with our own forces. This is a good sign.
For now, it sounds more theoretical, like just a project, but there aren't any clear data or parameters on how it will work yet. So everything is very much on the surface, very vague.
Despite the growing threat from Russia, Western politicians continue to have doubts, fearing that deploying fighter jets will lead to a direct confrontation with Russia. Moscow, in turn, is exerting pressure, claiming that any attempts to create a no-fly zone or air shield over Ukraine will be considered an act of aggression by the West. Can Europe protect the Ukrainian sky? For now, these are just discussions. But the stronger the Russian attacks become, the more likely it is that European leaders will be forced to move from words to action. That's all from me for now. I was with you, Darina Hutsakalo. More hellish news from the front in our next edition. Well, in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and like. See you!